All right, it's Thursday, and we're blowing the bunker covers off with an overview of the transition battlefield landscape. It's the aerial view of the terrain we'll be flying over in our Liberator airplane and bombing the transition lives with inconvenient truths. But first, a short story as we get into this terrain overview, an unforgiving landscape and raging storm on the transition battlefield. So, I'm going to tell you a story on how all this came to be. As a naval logistician with experience in operational planning, the 22 per day push-up challenge 2 years ago, leading up to Memorial Day 2020, prompted me to push back against the status quo. I asked myself a short question: are we doing transition right? I instantly recognized that no, we'd gotten it all backwards. Transition wasn't, and isn't, the problem. It's intentional, informed planning well before transition and transformation that requires attention. Instead of reacting to that inevitable departure from the ranks, why aren't we ready for it? The family unit would be much better off if truly ready for transition and the necessary transformation and ready from the earliest days in service. The contrarian thought with this is, if we're deployment ready, then by default, we're transition ready too. And so is our Armed Forces family. My community in the Navy, the U.S. Navy Supply Corps, has a motto: ready for sea. It's a motivational, career-focused motto that reinforces service member readiness to deploy on a moment's notice at the expense of most everything else. Service above self, that psychological makeover we get in training and have reinforced throughout years of a toxic culture. I lived by that motto since 2003, and it cost me dearly. A more balanced motto is ready for life. That's what the Liberty Accelerator is all about. Being not only ready for sea, but also ready for life, too. So here's an overview of the terrain, as I mentioned in the title of this post. There's so much focus on jobs in this arena that many other important aspects are being neglected, and sometimes forgotten altogether. It's as though the only thing being viewed is straight out of the windshield of that DoD TAP bus using a 50-year-old map. There is a simple solution to this challenge. Apply the art of war concepts from operational planning through the inevitable military transition that every service member and military spouse will eventually experience, and do so from the earliest days in service, with every deployment and every redeployment, at staff assignments and operational ass-kickings. As a logistician and supply chain management professional, I wonder why not treat the Armed Forces family unit as the weapon system that it is, and apply the ideas of life cycle logistics and the deployment workup cycle to their journey through military service. As we often say in the profession, logistics wins the war, and it's no different with military transition. Having an understanding of the tactics helps win your battles too. These ideas are an important part of true readiness. It's that simple, and I provide a visual from my book that I invite you to go to the online post and look at. In applying operational art and life cycle logistics processes and structure to military transition, I required some structure. 3 overarching areas containing categories within each intertwine and coexist. They must be acknowledged and addressed in parallel like we fight on the battlefield after strenuous planning, preparations, and workups. They can't be addressed in sequence like we march in single file picking up our helmets and skivvies at basic training indoctrination. No, they must be spread out and identified on the charts, identified well ahead of the battle beginning. So here they are: life pillars, work pillars, and liberty pillars. Discussing the life pillars: 1, whole health and wellness matters, and intentional medical records management in preparation for the inevitable VA compensation rating exams. We'll all take those. 2nd, self-actualization and answering the extremely important questions: who are you? What do you do, and why should anyone care? 3rd life pillar: wealth ideas concerning time, knowledge, experience, personal balance sheet management, cash flow sources, money aptitude, and financial literacy that you didn't learn in K through 12 and got no introduction from in college at any level. And no, the Bates Family Readiness Center government service employee has not set you up for financial success either. And under the life pillar, relationships, and the fact that it's no longer who you know in this world, but who knows you, likes you, and trusts you enough to do business with you, whether that's on the paying end or receiving end of any business transaction. All right, on to the 2nd pillar, work pillars. And I wrote here, pursuit of happiness, ? Because are we really seeking happiness through our work? I don't know, but I like the ring. So 3 topics within the work pillars. First, jobs in this dynamic, evolving market for goods and services that few of us have any control over. It's a new age, and applying the outdated ideas and approaches touted by the influencers over the past decade will likely not see you through the 20s very happily. Second item under the work pillar, expense of efforts and energy from our lives and work and leisure, day after day, week after week, month to month, that turns into seasons and then years. Is your expense worth the effort and energy? Is it a great investment of your precious, limited time? And lastly, taxes are sucking life right out of most everyone's lives, unless you're part of the filthy rich who've been able to keep much more of the wealth they've transferred away from your hard-earned pay. If reading this, I doubt that's you. And lastly, for liberty pillars, there's 3 of them. First, the ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness put forth over 200 years ago in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America are the glue that tie the previous 7 ideas together in this movement and call to action to take your liberty back. The goal is being fully ready to embrace it when the opportunity presents itself, planned or otherwise. Second liberty pillar, autonomy and independence. There's no independence within the mindset of Department of Dependence that Uncle Sam coddles you in. Even without a pension, the mind makeover you got in military service is extreme and requires a transformation to get out of that box you were placed in. And lastly, self-sufficiency and sovereignty. This is being able to get along in a complicated and dangerous world and keep your wits about you. It's a self-exploration journey where the individual embraces responsibility for themselves. So that's it for the 3 different pillar sections on this terrain map of the transition battlefield, as I call it. It's the life pillars, the work pillars, and the liberty pillars. Now, don't get ambushed believing the lies we've been told about military service, about transition, or about most anything, really. It's a much more complicated world than you've been led to believe. The lies perpetuated throughout the ranks are setting every armed forces family up to get sniped or hit by a mine they didn't know existed because they believed that transition was for later or that the government TAP had their best interest in mind. The Liberty Accelerator program prevents the heartache from a lack of proper planning in advance. And there's another graphic from my book that I invite you listeners to revisit and see. It really lays out how the Liberty Accelerator program supports you from the earliest days in service. This series is to warn you that the transition isn't for later and that your belief in a government program taking care of your family is a big gamble. Do you believe the DoD TAP is unlike any other government program you've ever encountered? That includes the Veterans Affairs programs, too. Continue believing the lies to your peril. I'll be here when the scales fall from your eyes and the zeitgeist we're in jolts you into reality. Learn a bit more about me at this link where you can spread the word about the movement, too. And that's going to be at the Linktree/Liberty Accelerator. So it's https://linktr.ee/Liberty Accelerator. And there's a link in the document for you to use. Now get bragging rights that you heard about it before your buddy or your best friend forever by sharing it with them right now. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are counting on you. To your liberty, heck yeah. And P.S., be sure to check in on the weekly post each morning where you'll find tips and tricks to avoid the ambushes on the transition battlefield. It's way different and much more dangerous from the 2010s. So be ready, engage, and we'll see you in flight.